So I figured with Oppenheimer coming out within the next 2 months, I figured I would go back and rewatch all of Christopher Nolan's movies again. I would go back and review all these movies again with the exception of Tenet. And I would start all the way back with his directorial debut, his movie Following. So Following is about this man who begins, well, following people. He kind of just goes and sees what they are doing in their daily lives. And then when he begins following this mysterious man named Cobb, the man kind of catches on to what he's doing and says, want to take this further, want to start breaking into people's houses. He agrees to it, and then things kind of just get more insane. He has a lot of questions, and he feels like he's caught in this weird, bizarre puzzle that basically destroys his life. So, Following, I remember watching a few times and never really getting into. I don't know if it's because of, like, the movie doesn't really have enough time, and the movie's only at 70 minutes. And I do think, overall, it is an interesting movie. It's effective enough, but I also kind of wish that this movie was a little bit longer in retrospect, but then again, it was just more of a tease of what Christopher Nolan can do rather than something that Christopher Nolan was doing at the moment. So the acting overall is pretty good. Jeremy Theobald, I believe that's his name. He does a really good job playing this guy who's like basically thrown into this whole world of chaos. And Alex Hall as Cobb, I thought he was really good in this movie. Definitely very mysterious and definitely mysterious, and at the same time kind of just like very aware of like what's going on and definitely in control of what's going on. Lucy Russell as this femme fatale who becomes involved with both these men, I thought she was really good in her performance. And I do find it fascinating that hardly any of these actors actually worked again afterwards. I think the lead actor has appeared in other movies directed by Christopher Nolan, but he hasn't really appeared in anything else. I do think that they should have been given more of a chance to be in movies. Also, the score of this movie, I think, is really good. I think it's very underrated. It's definitely very minimalist, but at the same time, it's like, I thought it was very fascinating. I thought it was very eerie. I thought it was very suspenseful. I do think it matches the film perfectly. No one really talks about the score. Like, no one talks about it. I've seen reviews where people talk about this movie, and hardly anyone mentions the score. I do think there are a few interesting themes in this movie, particularly how Following kind of works. Obviously, at first, it's like, oh, it's just about following people and kind of like going around. But then the main character kind of just starts dressing up like Cobb and kind of just starts acting like him. I do think that is very interesting as well and kind of adds a lot of layers to the characters. And I do think the twists on a neo-noir genre are very fascinating. And again, it's more of a tease of what Christopher Nolan could do, because there are like moments where it's like, oh, I recognize this from his other works. And it's definitely something that it was a movie that he attempted to do, but really couldn't because he was very constrained by his budget, unfortunately, of only $6,000, impressively. And I also, even though it's 70 minutes, it doesn't overstay its welcome. I feel like a movie like this could be like 2.5 hours long, and thankfully it isn't. It's definitely a movie it's short enough to kind of get noticed, but at the same time, it's like, we're not going to overstay our welcome. We'll kind of just leave these mysteries, and then, we'll just go on to the next movie. Is there anything about this movie I don't really like? Well, most of the stuff I don't like about this movie are pretty much about, well, again, a lot of the things are very, very tight because the budget was very small, and apparently Nolan could only work on this movie on weekends, and they only had like 2 days at a time to actually work on this. So some of the things that I kind of don't really care for include like the cuts to black are kind of annoying upon a rewatch. I felt like they were annoying. Again, that may be just because of the budget. And also, the cinematography is fine. It's, cool to see it in black and white and kind of like how Nolan would later play with it in a movie like, say, Memento. But it also kind of just looks a little too grainy. And again, it's small budget. He definitely didn't have the proper equipment to do this movie. So I do think it is effective enough, but I kind of wish it was a little bit better. And even though I just mentioned it doesn't overstay its welcome, I feel like he could have taken this concept a little bit further, honestly, but I also just don't want him to like turn this into an actual movie, because I feel like it would kind of just go on for way too long. And admittedly, there's some moments where it is a little predictable and a few things aren't really explained well, but it is fascinating to go back and watch this to kind of see where Christopher Nolan kind of like took some of his themes that were in some of his later movies like Memento and Insomnia, and then kind of go back and seeing like this is where he kind of like planted the seeds, but then those movies afterwards were like the actual things that grew from it. So Following is a movie that's an interesting look back. It may not be the greatest thing out there, but it's definitely worth a watch, especially if you are a fan of Christopher Nolan. I'll give it 2.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. So, have you actually seen Following? And what's your favorite movie by Christopher Nolan? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.